Hey, my dear students, we will continue our lesson on Introduction to Environmental Science. But before that, we need a disclaimer that our PowerPoint presentation was taken from www.ourroomscience.com. So we will discuss today about the tragedy of commons. This was first published by an economist in 1833, describing a major cause of resource depletion. Individuals neglect the well-being of society in the pursuit of personal gain. Commons are resources that are shared and not owned. In economic science, the tragedy of the commons is a situation in which individual users who have open access to a resource and hampered by shared social structures or formal rules that govern access and use act independently according to their own self-interest and contrary to the common good of all users, cause depletion of the resource through their uncoordinated action. The concept originated in an essay written in 1833 by the British economist William Forster Lloyd, who used a hypothetical example of the effects of unregulated grazing on common land, also known as common, in Great Britain and Ireland. The concept became widely known as the tragedy of the commons over a century later after an article written by Garrett Hardin in 1968. So commons are the resources that are needed by all people, all individuals, and when self-interest or self-gain becomes dominant in the heart of a person or people, and then he tends to gather all the resources or overexploit all the resources, what happens is that the other members of the population cannot or can no longer avail of that resources. Here comes self-interest and self-gain. And it will eventually lead to the depletion of the resources. In this classic example, wherein two villages both consist of sheep farmers who raise and sell sheep to a nearby city, the first village used the area for grazing of the sheep being raised by these farmers in unregulated way. So they are just free to use the area. While in the second village, there is a law being passed assigning each farmer a fenced section of the pasture. So there is what we call a distinct boundary between these farmers, and a certain area is intended for them, for their sheep. So which of the two will likely experience resource depletion? In this case, we can say that the second village is better than the first village, because in the second there is what we call a regulation, and there is an equal sharing of the resources. So conflict between farmers will be avoided, and of course they can have self-management of the area being assigned to them. So in this example, second village will tend to maximize the resources, and at the same time will also avoid conflict between the farmers. This tragedy of the commons has what we call the domino effect, because at the in the end, the resources depletion will cause a lot of problems in our environment. Overexploitation of the resources will lead to uh, biodiversity loss and pollution in pollution and destruction of our environment. So in the atmosphere, in the ocean, as well as climate change, are global examples of the tragedy of commons. Now let's talk about the natural resource classifications. So what are the classifications of our natural resources? We have four types: inexhaustible, renewable, non-renewable, recyclable, and non-renewable, recyclable. Inexhaustible, those are resources that cannot be used up. It's available every day. Example, this is the sunlight, the solar energy which we can harness or which we can collect every day using our solar cells or solar panel. This is one of the best example of an resources and energy resources which is available every day. Renewable will be replaced, but often at a slower rate than they are used. Example of this are the soil or the timber. Another example is the coral reef. Do you know that coral reef grows in 1 year for just 1 millimeter? So the growth of this is at a slower rate, so we cannot replace it easily. Once we consume these resources, it will take long years or many years before we can, or before the nature can replace it. Non-renewable. Non-renewable means not replaced within the human time scale. This examples are the coal, oil, and the natural gas. This is just for a single use. So that's why we are encouraged to use what we call renewable energy resources, because we are facing shortage or crisis in terms of the coal, the oil, or the natural gas, because as we notice today, the price of our crude oil or gasoline is getting high. That's because of the high demand and short supply. We have also the recyclable, non-renewable, not replaced within the human time scale, but can be used repeatedly. These are minerals or metals. These are the metals or taken from mining or through mining. Here in Palawan we have nickel, an example of a minerals being taken from our mining sites. These are non-renewable but recyclable, because we can use it repeatedly in different forms. Say for example, it can be a gold, can be in the form of a jewelry, or in the form of a coin, or it can be transformed again into different kind of jewelry. So those are the different classifications of our natural resources.